Good evening, my name is Edgar Hernandez and I'm here with another update video for ParticleKnight. Let's say this is milestone 6 and what am I going to do for this milestone 6? Well, this is going to be basically an overview review of all the things that were added within the project. So let's go ahead and start with showcasing that the layout is a bit different right now. Before it used to be right underneath the player character, but now we're going to take this up to 4-notch and a different spin on it. We're going to do it in a top-down viewpoint, as we were able to utilize a new mechanic, and that is to track down the character wherever the mouse is pointing. So I'm gonna start this up a little bit, just a little demonstration for it, and it's gonna be a little bit loud, so bear with me and just see how this new mechanic is going. Yep, so the new mechanic right there that I implemented was the fact that you're able to look over an overview world and you're able to see the character where they are within the level, as well as enemies that are spawning over time. As you can see that the enemies all spat out at the same time. That is because now I was able to adjust the generate enemies script, and what it does now is that I was able to implement a timer to it. So now you can put it in how much time it is, and this is a float. So a float of seconds is what we're going for. So we're going to go ahead and put 3 seconds. And as we play the level, you're going to see that the enemies are going to be spawning in over time rather than just being killed off, waiting to be killed by the player. So let's go ahead and demonstrate a bit for it. And that was the fact that there's also a bit of weight added to the spawning. So instead of just being just the simple enemies that spawn out in the level, it will sometimes also be a dud and instead drop a healing item for the player to be able to recover. So if we were to increment the amount of enemies in the level to, let's say, perhaps a longer game, then that's why the implementation of health items was necessary. And also, in case if we want to make it 2 seconds, then the player will not always be in trouble. It will still be a little bit of a balance, but it's all based on the luck script but then generate enemies. Let me just show that off real quick. So start coroutine, and it's going to be a coroutine of doing a while loop. It'll be counting, it will be dependent on the max amount of enemies that are out there. Enemy count's going to be set to 0 in this case, because we want it to reach up to the point where it's the maximum amount of enemies It is possible. We can get this amount even higher if the designer wishes. We're adding in the luck, and with this luck, we're setting it so that remainder, if the remainder of 6 is a 0, then it's a luck. It was lucky, so then they get a health bar, not a health bar, or a health pack drop instead. And it's going to be waiting for that timer as well, and before we can repeat back the loop. If this wasn't hit, then the enemy will be spawned instead. And this is where it's instantiated, and it is yielding to wait for a couple of seconds. So it is based on time, not necessarily on how many enemies you killing, just because there's max. There's not really a max amount at that point. It just still keeps counting down. And so over time, it will still spawn new enemies into the level. So let's say, for example, let's set this timer to 1 second, and then we play. Brand new enemies are spawning into the level. I still haven't killed them yet. That is a quick fix. Correct for me now. This game. Alright, so there's also another bit of noting. You've also noticed that the mouse, wherever the mouse is positioned, the player character is rotating, or should I say facing towards where that mouse is, without necessarily rotating the entire character towards the to look directly at the pointer where it is. Otherwise it's going to have a weird upward rotation, and the player is going to be a bit of a interesting position, and it's going to look a little bit wonky. So that is all thanks to the following script of, it's this script right here, the top-down character view. I placed a region here to be able to organize this line of code beautifully. It is all to handle the inputs that is for the main character, and this is the movement speed, the rotational speed, as well as if we want to utilize the rotate towards the mouse or not. And there's also the top overview camera. And as you saw at the beginning of the video, you know, the camera is right here, and it's not even aligned towards the player character. Player character is super far away from the actual object, which is the little camera. So once we start playing, you can see that the camera overview starts to follow the main character. You know, if you don't want to utilize this, you don't want to stay at this viewpoint, then by the brand new press of the C button, you can change into the view that was originally showed in previous videos, which is a third-person view. As well as you can see in the top left, I have a number of lives. Now normally, the approach is to have the player die, get destroyed, die off. I've set it to 20 points in order to win. So now you can take an approach of determining how long you want the game to last. It's always been that I've set it to 20 points in order to win. Well, now you can set how long you want the game to last. Score is basically the goal, the end goal for the character to reach. For very long games, we can set it to even 30 points for the player to win. So you can see the wave of enemies is going to be very hectic, blowing a challenge to the player. So now with the new mechanic of having the character to switch between two different viewpoints, you're basically adding another layer of boost to the player if they seem to be struggling with the current third-person view for the player. So now, let's go ahead and try. And that's how the entirety challenge of the game will be looking at. Player now can switch between two different types of viewpoints to employ a bit of a more challenge aspect. Another interesting point that I need to mention is where exactly is located the top-down camera and how it is set up. Within Projectile Sword, we set it so that if the input of the C button on the keyboard has been detected, then we will have a boolean of is top down, which is to determine if top down is true. If it is true, which in this case we have set it to true because that's how we're starting the game, mentioned up above here, then it will go ahead and perform an act of disabling all the new mechanics that were placed for the top-down character view. Also make sure that it locks the cursor mode, so it brings back to the original way of playing the game. However, if that's not the case, if it is, then by pressing the C button again, then we can reactivate these mechanics. And we also want to make sure that cursor lock mode is set to none, because otherwise if it's set to locked, then the mouse is going to be in a fixed position, but at the same time it will make it so that the mouse disappears from the game altogether, making it difficult for a top-down view gameplay if we're not actively looking at the cursor of the mouse all the time. Going back for the sounds just for a little bit, there's something that I forgot to mention about how I was able to get all this sound operating appropriately. Well, that's because I was able to expose the parameters of each volume of every single mixer. And the way that you do that is if you select one of the mixers right here, then you go up to here, which is volume, and right now you see that it says on expose. Well, that's how you can expose the volume set, and right now it's set to linear because we're using a bit of a, like a slider to be able to control the volume at will. And that is how this volume is also being able to controlled if you were to start or initiate from the main menu. So just really quick, going back to the main menu. So that is how just like lowering it right here. So that way you can control how much volume is there. And with that, that should be covering almost all of the new things that I've added in to the game itself. Well, that is without even showing you what happens if the player does not successfully defeat the enemies within time span. Well, let's just utilize through just exclusive for editors when they're trying to edit something or debugging. Set this down to 0. Still lose. And that's what happens. You still have the amount of lives there, and the way that the lives are counted as, think about it as if it were the life canisters from Metroid. That is the inspiration, that the countdown of the lives is done this way, where you reach your life down to 0, or your health reaches down to 0, but then your life count decreases and then your health goes back up. But then once you don't have any lives, that's it. Game over. And this is where the magic is being done through the start. We're actually doing the game objects of the life text, which is what you've been seeing. We have the countdown set to 2 right here, and the UI countdown counter UI is being updated as well. It has to, because if we do it the other way without this script right here, then it would still be updating, but you wouldn't be able to see it in the UI because the UI is not actively updating in accordance to when the change happens. Within game outcome, this is where the script of the health is being managed, because it's a current state outcome that we are determining, which is why the life count is being done in this place, because we want to know if we're still going to be in winning state condition or if losing state condition. And so the way this is done is if the current health is equal or less than 0 and the life count is less than 0, then we make sure to refill our health, while at the same time we decrease the life count within the life tracker script. And we're also updating that UI, and that's how you're able to see the reflective changes that are happening within the life. Once the health reaches 0, then life counts down, but then your health goes back up. Again, it's like the Metroid mechanic, where you still have a lot of hit points left, but you still have a lot of health still backed up there. And also make sure that when you use the top-down character view, then you also make sure that the movement speeds are, align themselves perfectly, as you can pretty much just keep it a top-down character view, and you can cheat if you have different values between one mechanic and then the other. But it still brings a lot of excitement, entertainment for the player. And I really hope that you've enjoyed this small demonstration of all the new things that were done for ParticleKnight. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night and afternoon.